Welcome to the Tech Simple podcast. Independent insights into the latest AV technologies, as well as tips and best practices to optimize AV solutions for modern workplace and learning environments. Here are your hosts, David and Jonathan from Konnectus AV Consulting.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Simple podcast. As always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-founder, David Allara. Also joining us today is Domino Risch. Domino is the global sector lead for commercial and workspace at the renowned architecture firm Hassell. Domino has extensive experience in workplace, leading clients and design teams through projects that are fundamentally aligned with organizational, cultural, strategic, and future-focused business objectives. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on board. I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us.
Oh, absolutely, Domino. I'm just casting my mind back to 18 months ago. We had that online panel, I guess it was, where we were just talking about the experience, the employee experience and the importance of workplace design and technology as well. That was 18 months ago, so a while ago now. It'd be great to, I suppose, dive into workplace design today and maybe compare your thoughts now to what was all on trend 12 to 18 months ago. I mean, are there any sort of things jumping out that, you can see are really a lot more popular or working pretty well at the moment?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question because you've almost got two speeds of change happening. You've got the change of accepted work practice and a kind of a transition to a digital and a hybrid work platform for most people as a default, where you've got choice on where and when and how you work. And that's happened extraordinarily rapidly because of lockdowns and, the obvious 3-year situation we're still in. But then you've got the kind of the glacial, by comparison, pace of change to workplace environments and the kind of the physical, social, cultural, and even technology infrastructure that wraps itself around what a workplace is. And we're seeing the effects of those two speeds of change playing out now. And the change that's happening inside physical workplaces is nowhere near as fast as some of the other changes that are happening. So it's interesting. 18 months ago, I think a lot of us thought we were coming out of those, really dark days of the first lockdowns in 2020. And goodness me, doesn't that feel like a long time ago now?
It sure does, yeah.
And I think that, over the last couple of years, we as an industry, we thought we'd see a lot more experimentation and prototyping and testing new ways of doing things as simple as meeting rooms and technology that really supports hybrid working, which is here to stay. Every survey you can read everywhere is saying that. Our own research is saying that as well.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing, and part of it is a kind of a fear factor for a lot of organisations to kind of just, if we don't have to do anything, let's not. Okay. Let's just pause and wait and see. So we thought we'd see a bit of experimentation. That hasn't happened as much as we thought it would. But the flip side is I think we're coming to that point where people who've put things off have got to the point where they're fed up with working with legacy environments that really don't suit current ways of working. And so I think we're about to see a real, as lease cycles expire and people need to do something, I think we're going to see a lot more innovation and change in workplace in the coming years. So that's the kind of the two speeds that we've got. We've got cultural change, which is happening rapidly, and physical change is happening slowly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I try and tune into what's happening in the rest of the world as well, especially, US and Europe. And it seems to me that what you're saying is also, eventuating there. But I feel like there are some things, and we see it already in the projects we work on. There are some big shifts in kind of the designs that seem to be appearing more often in these workplaces. There seems to be more space for, sort of more casual chats. There seems to be more space for focus time. So it's as if it's not an office, but it's, you can go away and have your call for an hour or so or do some focus work for 2 hours and then jump out of there and it's freed up for someone else. We're seeing a lot of those being quite popular. I mean, is that ringing true?
100%. I think what we're seeing as a result of this change to attitudes to work and absolute focus on how to encourage people to come back is really starting to drive a quite radical, in some cases, rethink of the purpose of the office, the purpose of a workplace. And I think at the same time, you've got really strongly competing demands. You've got some of our research that we do at Hassell shows that after the commute, which is the single most influential decision-making point on whether you attend work or not. You know, if you live 2 hours away, you're far less likely to go to work every day than if you live 10 minutes away. That's the single most influential, you know, decision point. The second most is whether or not you have confidence that you'll have a place where you can work and focus. That doesn't necessarily mean an office, but it usually doesn't mean sitting at a sea of open plan workstations. So because of that, what we're seeing is where we are working with clients who are really reshaping what their workplaces are for and what they look like as a result physically. We're seeing a lot more built zone. We're seeing a lot more enclosed rooms. We're seeing rooms where people can take 1 or 2 person Teams/Zoom/Blue Jeans calls, whatever platform you want. And we're actually seeing rooms being set up specifically for that, even to the point where we're seeing, you know, halo lights in rooms so that you look good, a concern for where the door is so that if it's glass, you're not watching people walking past and that you can have a background that's not being interrupted by activity. So we're seeing that. We're seeing a change in the way meeting rooms are thought about, and we're seeing a lot more project type spaces as opposed to just fixed single purpose meeting rooms. Yep. But even those themselves, I've been a long advocate over these last 3 years. I say long advocate, you know, 3 years is not that long, but, you know, I've been an advocate for looking at the way we use technology in rooms. So changing that model of, you know, the long table, the screen and the camera at the short end and everybody kind of facing one direction, to turning that round 90 degrees and having the long side of the table facing the screens, and then having much more screen real estate so that you can get not postage size faces on a Zoom call, kind of one-to-one scale people who are hybrid, more cameras in the ceiling or, you know, somewhere so that you can see all of the faces of the people in the room for the people who are hybrid, rather than one postage stamp of 15 people sitting around a table, and then a screen for content, and then a screen for a Miro board or something where there's digital note taking, or, you know, people can contribute both physically and virtually. So that's something that's yet to really start to manifest itself in some of our projects, but we're really excited to see, you know, steps in that direction as we go. So that's kind of one end. But the other changes that we're seeing is exactly as you mentioned, you know, do you remember we've got work from work and not work from work, or work from home, work from work. Now we've got go to work to not work, which is a bit counterintuitive. But, you know, a lot of people think work is just, you know, when you're sitting at your computer and you're being individually productive. That you can do equally well. It's been proven anywhere. You know, you can do that at home. If your home environment is suitable, you can find a co-working or a third space somewhere. You can do it in cafes. You can take your Teams calls while you're walking the park, walking the dog. You know, there's lots of places you can be individually productive. And so most people are not choosing to come to work when they've got a massive deadline to smash out and they can't be interrupted.
Sure, yeah.
They're choosing to come to work when they want to connect and socialise with peers and collaborators. And so because of that, in a kind of opposite direction to what I first talked about, which is more built space, more space for people to kind of retreat and focus, to get away from the kind of sea of workstations where everyone's on a Zoom call simultaneously, we're actually seeing a rise in workplaces that almost completely invert the ratio of individual workspace to collaborative and social workspace. So we want places where people want to come together. So we have to give them platforms to do that, whether it's big town halls for those sort of quarterly catch-ups, or whether it's, you know, larger kitchen spaces where you can have regular morning teas and get, you know, teams or business units together, whether it's spaces that are much more like, you know, the Qantas Club or a work lounge or something like that, where, you know, you can work but you're not expected to sit there for 8 hours. And so all of the ergonomic things drop away. And you can just, you know, be tapping away at your emails or cleaning up your inbox, which I've got to say is still a problem and never won't be as far as I'm concerned. It needs daily, almost hourly maintenance. But, you know, you can do all of those things without being sitting at a desk. And so we're starting to see kind of ergonomic work points really going the way of the dinosaur. And we're actually already at Hassell, we're working on a project, the first of what I hope is many, because I've been advocating for this for a long time and trying to provoke a response, is for the deskless office. We're working on one now, which is...
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's about 1,500 square metres. It's a fairly large single floor plate, and there will be something like 12 less than 20 anyway, things that look like workstations. The rest of the space is going to be collaborative, social, workshopping, project space, big boardrooms, meeting rooms, cafe spaces, even big kitchen table type spaces where teams can choose to work together, but not necessarily for 8 hours a day, and certainly not with 2 big ergonomic monitors and, keyboards and stuff. But, it's kind of laptop only use. And then there'll be quiet rooms where you can go and do a day of Zoom calls if you want. And then there'll be sort of ergonomic for work points for those people who choose to come to work to stare at a screen for 8 hours a day, which is, I've got to say, not that many.
That's quite a shift in the way that people are working. And you're talking about a big shift in the way people want to work, but the physical space is lacking. Are you seeing a difference based on different industries? The tech industry is more open to that type of working versus professional services?
Yeah, absolutely. I think your starting point as an organisation plays a massive role in, where you move to next. So, for example, if you think about a law firm, they had this hugest amount of shock in March 2020 when all of the partners in all of the law firms across Australia were told to take their laptop and go home, and they didn't have a PA, they didn't have a printer outside their door or even inside their door, and there were no associates. Yeah, no, cool. Well, a lot of them live in nice houses that have the equivalent of a corner office perhaps.
True.
And interestingly, the senior leaders in those professional services firms, in some instances, are the last ones to want to come back because they've realised how good they've got it.
Right.
Whereas it's the younger generations who are hungry to learn, hungry to interact, really want to prove their chops and feel like they've got to be visible to leadership to be able to do that. They're the ones that are returning quickly. But to go back to your question, yeah, if you're a law firm, you've got the biggest amount of shift to go, like moving to an agile, non-dedicated seating arrangement where there's fewer seats than there are people is still a barrier. We're working with some organisations that are absolutely looking to either go there in their next move or be ready to go there at some point in the future. And they're kind of minimising their footprint now, not thinking about growth, but instead of growing into empty space, they're thinking about we'll grow into a sharing ratio so we don't have to take more space and we'll let go of owned desks. So that's at one end of the spectrum. At the other end, you've got your tech and your big finance, campus-style workplaces for CommBank, ANZ, NAB, those guys. They were already pretty much in an environment that really doesn't need much work to make it agile, great, and hybrid great. And so in some ways, they've got an entirely different problem. They're the ones who are often left with far less space, far more space than they need, far fewer people are coming to work.
Yep.
And as a result, they're looking at ways to kind of shrink footprint. It's not that the product is bad or the mix of spaces is necessarily wrong. Maybe there's a bit of tweaking, a bit of tech upgrade, but they just need far less of it.
So their leasing bill is too
Exactly.
big.
So another project that we're working on, and it's in Melbourne, it's really exciting, and on our Hassell website we've posted a blog about this, although we can't talk about the client's name. But one of the things we're working on with them is they're an occupier of about 10 floors in a building only with them in it. And the way it's organised is the bottom 2 or 3 floors is like a shared social podium, let's call it. So it's got all of the big kitchens, social and collaboration space you'd need, and, things that will never not need, like a comms room and, all that kind of stuff. And then the floors above, virtually identical, and they're in 2-floor blocks, so no huge atriums because that's really difficult to partition off and separate. But what's really unique about the project is we've been working to develop a kind of some of those space use apps where you book your presence or you book a desk for a day and introduce an element of AI. And the AI component, you have to tell it when you want to come to work. So I want to be there on Tuesday. It knows who you work with, who your team is in an org chart kind of a way. It knows your personal preferences of I like to sit at this type of desk or I'd like to be on my own, and you can book what you need outside of that. It will also have a look at your Zoom calendar and see who you're engaging with or who you might be working with through your contact lists, your Slack channels, all that kind of stuff. And it'll aggregate all of that information. And instead of you going to a neighbourhood that you go back to every time you're there, it will tell you where to go. So say on a Monday, you've only got people across 10 floors. If you've only got 20% of your headcount, they might fit on one floor. So instead of having 2 people on each floor and it feeling really empty and horrible, what will happen is the app will tell you where to sit so that you've got the best case of bumping into people and getting that real energy bounce from being there. And as a result, connecting to a smart building, what you can do is you can shut down the lights, the air conditioning, you can tell the milk guy not to turn up, don't fill up the fridges on those floors, you can tell the cleaners not to bother coming because nobody will be on those floors that no one else is going to. So you might not be able to change your lease daily, but you can definitely start to impact your outgoings, which is an enormous saving and better for the environment at first glance. But you can also create a better experience. So the use of technology, I've been saying for ages, get on board whatever your favourite prop tech startup is and invest because, there's no way prop tech isn't part of this solution.
No, I love that. You're 100% correct. The experience is really so key. I was listening to a podcast this morning. It was a panel, and there was one gentleman there from Uber, I think he was, based in LA, and he said the office now has to be a destination. It has to be something that attracts or it's magnetic for people to want to go to, and you only get one chance. You can't give a bad experience because people will sort of disengage very quickly and just go back to not showing up, which is...
It's actually a bigger problem. It's a bigger problem in the States than it is here in Australia. We're okay. If you have a look across, property council averages in CBDs, we're okay. Also got to remember that pre-pandemic, you rarely got more than 70% of your headcount turning up on any given day anyway. There's always going to be someone travelling or on sick leave or working in somebody else's office. So the idea that we'll ever get back to 100% of capacity is just silly. I think anywhere close to 60% on any given day, you're kicking goals. If you're reaching 80% of your headcount being at work on any given day, I'd say find out what you're doing right and wrap it in a box and sell it because it's gold. But what I would say is, and slightly contrary to, where we work, which is in the built environment, I'm not being a traitor to our industry, but I do think there's only so much that space and design and great facilities can do. To be honest, I think we've reached a point where the fundamental contract between employee and employer has shifted. The power balance is different. And people always tell me, oh, yeah, but in a downturning economy, that'll change. I don't think it will, because I think people have learned how to work flexibly. There might be a small, very small percentage of people who take advantage of that, but I think non-performance is always visible. You will always find that out. If somebody's not working, you will find out rather quickly. So I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but I do think legacy models of management and leadership and cultural norms are not being shifted as fast as they need to deal with a model of work which is now hybrid always, hybrid first, whatever you want to call it. People have choice on where, when and how they work. And I think culturally a lot of organisations are yet to acknowledge that and shift to it and start training people on how to lead in an environment where you can't see your people physically. I actually think that and sort of legacy issues generally of poor behaviour, poor cultures, and, every organisation's got pockets of that, surely. That's the bit that's really people have got to really start looking at that rather than looking at, I like to call it the carrot and the stick. You can't bash people with a stick to make them come to work because ultimately you will make them so off-put, such a feeling of lack of trustworthiness and so much frustration at not having flexibility. They'll simply get a job either in a different industry or in a peer or a competitor that offers flexibility. So I think that will maintain even through an economic downturn because talent will go where they get what talent wants. So long as somebody's offering, people will move.
No, that is a very good point. Old habits die hard, I guess you'd say. It has been a very rapid, kind of couple of years here, and we can't expect everything to change overnight. But the office is not dead. It is merely changing, and technology is certainly helping make that change. I think it would be great to finish up here. Domino, you're obviously an expert in workplace design and advising your clients around workspace. What is maybe a couple of best practice tips or maybe you could share a bit of insight into your process as to how you go about, I guess, helping a customer transition from where they are today to maybe where their new office needs to be?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We started thinking about how our process would change pretty early in 2020. We sort of realised that existing briefing methods might not. Somebody called us up in, April 2020 during lockdown and said, hey, let's do a new project. We were like, how do we account for this in our process, all of this change? And to be honest, over time, I think less has changed than you would think. I think design is always about solving problems, some more complex than others. And I think really that's all that we're doing, is adding a small factor of how many people turn up on any given day, and then how to deal with that in a long-term scenario is really the only element that we're adding that is not a question we would have asked previously. We would have asked previously questions like, what's your head count, what's your estimated head count in 5 years, or whatever the term of the lease might be. And we would have planned for some growth, but we wouldn't unless you were already moving toward agile. And, then you've got sharing ratio questions of how many people turn up each day. Unless you were prepared to go there, it didn't really matter how many people. You just assumed it was some number close to 100%, and that's what you would design for. So what's happened is now, particularly as the return to work has been happening for such a long time, particularly in Australia, although the UK is still dealing with very much a legacy of very long-term lockdown and people not going to work for such a long time. Australia is actually doing pretty well in the return to work states. And so new clients now are coming to us, and really all we're doing that's different is we're asking slightly more nuanced questions when we're surveying them. So usually if we're setting up a brief or a workplace strategy, we'll do an all-staff survey. And we've just had to tweak those questions a little bit to understand what motivates people to come to work, what are demotivating factors in coming to work, what are the spaces and the settings and the tasks that they would really value at work as opposed to at home. And then we also ask questions about what do you do at home and what works better there. And it's really interesting because our survey, we run a workplace survey, a global survey every year. And last year, we found some data through comparative questioning that showed us that exactly the same proportion of people feel they're more productive at home as feel they're more productive at work. And so this idea of where you should be to be productive, there is no one answer to that. It's very much in the individual's choice. So, if you've got toddlers running around at home, and, if I'm a working mum and I've got toddlers and I've got a husband who's constantly traveling, working from home is probably not my idea of fun, and I'm probably not hugely productive all the time. There will be periods, no doubt. Whereas if I'm an empty nester and, I've got a beautiful house on the northern beaches and I've got my corner office in my home overlooking, Manly Beach or something, I'm probably more productive there than I am at work. It depends on your definition of productivity. It depends on your role within an organisation. It depends how much autonomy you feel you have, and it depends on your age of life and where you are. And then it depends on your commute as well. So all of these factors play into account. So we now have to take all of that into account and start recommending sharing ratios, like how many desks per 10 people should you put in to take into account what people are saying. And that's where some of the organisations just get stuck because they're like, but we don't want what people are saying they want to do. And we're like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to make a policy? Yeah. Okay, you're going to make a policy. What are you going to do when people ignore that policy? Because I guarantee you people are ignoring policy absolutely everywhere. That in every organisation, all of policy is being ignored. Some people do more. We know from, media and working with Atlassian, they're one of Australia's great tech stories. Mm-hmm. They've got a policy of, we don't care where you live, we just want your work product. So long as you're in the same time zone and you're comfortable working as a team together, we don't care. Come in 4 times a year, shipping days and product launches. And people often ask me, well, if Atlassian are doing that, why are they building that 50-story tower down at Central? The answer is just because that's their policy doesn't mean that's what happens. So that's a minimum. They're gangbusters. They got people there all day, every day, and they're running out of space. So one of the things I think it's taking a long time to sort of ingrain into, property and leaders in organisations' mind is the policy you set is going to have absolutely no bearing on what actually happens. What you need to do is you need to create a magnetic, compelling, wonderful, attractive, warm, nourishing, vibrant, energetic space for people to come to. You've got to use a carrot rather than a stick.
That is actually a great quotable takeaway there. The policy you set has nothing to do with reality. And
what are you going to do? You're going to start firing people because they didn't turn up on a Thursday when they said they would? And, what are you going to happen when it rains? So this is the thing. I had to take an architectural jury around one of our workplaces on Monday. And first of all, I was like, I didn't have a choice. It was Monday. It was never going to be busy on a Monday. And then it was 4:00 in the afternoon. I had no choice. There's never going to be anyone there on a Monday afternoon at 4. And then on top of that, it rained on Monday. And I was sitting there and when I woke up in the morning, I went, this is the worst possible. And, but this is the thing. It's raining, I'm not coming to work. Or, my son sprained his ankle, I'm not coming to work. Or it's a bit too humid for me. Or the train's not working. Or there's too many people on the bus and I can never catch it, so I'll be in at lunchtime. All of those things happen all the time. So I think I hear people all the time hanging on to this idea, but I want people there because, we're a people kind of organisation and we need to be face-to-face. And I know that it's better face-to-face. I think we all know that. But I think insisting on it as the default is going to ultimately backfire on many organisations if they don't show that flexibility and that trust, which is what it's being interpreted as when you take that away, a lack of trust.
All right, very good. I would probably just the last question I wanted to ask you just about your process there. We're obviously AV specialists and, technology is becoming more and more prevalent. It's sort of a must-have. The AV has to work first time, every time. And in your process, how early do you think it's important to be looking at the technology options, whether it's AV or otherwise, for workplaces? And further to that, you sort of started the podcast talking about how frustrated you were that people weren't interested in proof of concept or pilots type things. And we're the same, to be honest with you, because we've always found that those are fantastic ways to really sort of figure out whether the tech's going to work or not, or if it's going to be popular with the people, it's going to be uptaken, add actual value to the business, these sorts of things. So with that hat on, how early does tech need to be factored in with the work you do?
Oh, I think it's right there up front. I mean, it would be an odd brief that we get that didn't somehow mention we want great tech that just works. We want to be able to walk into a room and everything just works. We don't want to have to log in when we leave our desk when we go into a meeting room. I'm sure you hear that all the time.
Yes.
So I think aspirationally, it's kind of easy. I think to make that come true and to also create a hybrid experience between technology and physical space design, you actually need to be solving for a great AV-centric experience as you design the physical space. And that might mean, as I said before, changing the orientation of the room, so the long side rather than the short side. It might mean designing all small 4-person rooms that might have one day previously had a round table and 4 chairs around it with a telephone on a credenza in the corner. It might mean that model never exists ever again, and you've got little D-shaped tables with the big screen on the wall with 3 or 4, maybe 5 chairs around it facing the screen, so you can have a small Zoom conversation or a small working session on a piece of shared content. And you kind of have to know those typologies and, probably 100 more that we don't have time to talk about. You have to be thinking about those as you're doing your very basic space modelling. You can't, it's very difficult once the floor plan's locked in at the end of concept design to then get somebody from AV to come over and go, oh, hey, hang on, there's none of this and there's none of that and now we can't do, So I think it's essential right up front. I think that's the answer you're looking for. It's true though.
No, fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Domino. It's always a pleasure to speak with you and get your wise words.
You're welcome.
There's a lot of great information there to unpack for the listeners, so really appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to another time in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tech Simple podcast. To like, share, or discover more episodes, head over to Spotify. If you'd like to talk to us about AV in your workplace or learning environment, book an initial discovery call with David or Jonathan at konnectus.com.au. And remember, Tech Simple!